All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dahl hanging out here with you. If you've not subscribed to the YouTube channel already, please go ahead and do so. If you're listening on podcast and you haven't subbed to the feed, you can also do that as well. Really appreciate everybody out there listening and watching wherever you are tuning in. What are the most important games for Kentucky basketball in their non-con slate? Well, Andy Patton, writer for Wildcats Today, host of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, decided to rank Kentucky basketball's non-con games 1 through 13, and we're going to go through them here on today's episode. The most important non-con game. We've talked about this. I think I completely agree with this from Andy Patton. Kansas is the most important non-con game of the slate. I think that you can make an argument for a couple of others, but I think the Jayhawks it should be the first couple of weeks of the season. Game 3 of the season, I think, is really important for UK. Andy Patton had to say this: Kentucky will have a mega early season test in Chicago and may have to handle this one at less than full strength if either Aaron Bradshaw or Ugonna Onyenso are still recovering from off-season injuries. Kansas is likely to begin the season ranked number 1 in the AP poll after Bill Self reloaded an already excellent roster during the offseason. Jayhawks lost Grady Dick, Jalen Wilson to the NBA, and a whopping 7 players to the NCAA transfer portal, but they added the best player available in the entire offseason, former Michigan center Hunter Dickinson. KJ McCullough and Nick Timberlake are here. Texas wing Arterio Morris is coming in as well. Dejuan Harris, probably one of the better point guards in the entire country. I think he's definitely top 5. Kansas is going to be really good. It's going to be a really good non-con game to begin the season. Like you mentioned, UK, maybe not at full strength. It's going to be a tough one, but I definitely think that the Wildcats can compete. Very important, I think, for Kentucky's resume, based on what Kansas is probably going to do to the Big 12 this season. This is where Patton has a really interesting change in his rankings. Immediately right after this Kansas game here. Number 2, December 16th, he's got North Carolina as the second most important game for the Wildcats this upcoming non-conference schedule. North Carolina and Gonzaga are the other 2 premier college basketball programs on Kentucky's schedule, Andy Patton says. But a neutral site against the Tar Heels in December is a tougher matchup than a true home game in February against the Bulldogs, even if the neutral site is in Atlanta. Caleb Love departing for Arizona is addition by subtraction for the Heels, as it allows R.J. Davis to handle point guard duties alongside Notre Dame transfer Cormac Ryan, who's actually a pretty good basketball player, and stud incoming freshman Elliot Cadeau. Armando Bacot is back in the front court, and the addition of Harrison Ingram as a point forward should play very well for UNC. So they've got a really good starting 5 here, and I like this take from Andy. I think that in terms of resume and in terms of overall team talent, I think Gonzaga I would put them at number 2 also because of the revenge factor here. But I really like this ranking here from Patton as the second most important game on Kentucky's non-con slate. UNC, the Tar Heels. If you've got any thoughts on where you would put North Carolina in this ranking, leave that in the YouTube comments below. I'm curious to see from you guys, what do you think is the most important game or games of this non-con schedule? Number 3 is Gonzaga. Like we talked about, the WCC using BYU to the Big 12 allows Gonzaga to schedule a non-conference opponent in the middle of their non-conference of their conference slate, and they did so against Calipari, I believe, as they used to do against Calipari coach Memphis squads, is what he says here. And they will hit the road to play at Rupp Arena as part of a 6-year series these 2 programs agreed to do before last season. Mark Few and the Zags got the best of Kentucky last year in Spokane, but as the Wildcats will have to deal with the monster in the middle, Drew Timme, he and star wing Julian Strother are heading to the NBA. Gonzaga did add a trio of talented transfers, and this is what I want to get to here. Creighton point guard Ryan Nimhard, and at center, Wyoming's Graham Ike. But after getting to play this team at home in February, when Calipari typically has his younger players in a rhythm, this is a big advantage for this team and could be enough to even this series at a win apiece. I agree with what Patton had to say. I like the players that Gonzaga has brought in. I think that they're a very talented team. More than anything, I have a lot of respect for what Mark Few likes to do offensively. I think that he, alongside Arizona, I think there are 2 of the better offenses in the entire country, at least in terms of what I would like to run. Love it, love it, love it. And I really do think that this is going to be a tough test. And again, to go back to what I was saying earlier, in terms of resume boosting, sure, North Carolina may end up playing a tougher schedule than Gonzaga will in the WCC, but I think that Gonzaga is probably from top to bottom. I think that because of their coaching and because of their talented players, I think they're a better team than North Carolina. That's just my guess. Now, UNC will rebound this season. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that UNC is a bubble team this year, but I just have a lot of faith in what Gonzaga is going to do. And then the fourth game here, Miami. Jim Larenga's Hurricanes have been back-to-back Elite Eights for the first time in program history, a testament to not only Coach L's recruiting and coaching acumen, but well-documented cash flow from their NIL collective. Next year's Miami team will be without ACC Player of the Year Isaiah Wong and Jordan Miller, two key guards from last year's squad. But this is what we were talking about on, I believe, a few episodes ago about Miami. They get Nigel Pack back, who was a really good scorer, Wooga Poplar, who was very efficient for them off the bench, Norchad Omir. They also added a player that a lot of different teams in the SEC wanted, Matthew Cleveland from Florida State, a wing there. Calipari's freshmen will have already played Kansas by this point, but this game will be another test before the SEC slate begins. This game's also at home for the Wildcats, which I think may factor into this ranking from Patton. The fifth most important game on the slate is at Louisville. I think that this makes sense to put Louisville here. I think that there are a lot of other really interesting games on this non-con slate that you can dive into, but Louisville being a little bit better this season, I think you got to watch out for them. This is what Patton had to say about them. Losing Trenton Flowers, who has left the program to play professionally in Australia, stings for Payne, but this is still a team expected to perform much better than they did in 2022-23, and they'll no doubt bring everything they've got for the Wildcats in late December. Payne and his staff made solid additions this offseason, including USC wing Trey White and embattled Illinois point guard Sky Clark. I had no idea that Sky Clark had transferred to Illinois this offseason. Wow. Sky Clark via the transfer portal and the number 6 ranked recruiting class per 24/7 Sports. Big man Dennis Evans and point guard Tyler Johnson. I am so sorry. I'm in the process of going through the fact that Sky Clark has moved on from Illinois and will now be playing at Louisville. Wow. How about that? 7 points last year, decent 3-point shooter, really good shooter from 2. His field goal percentage overall not great, but which is weird considering he's anyway. Point being, Sky Clark with Louisville with the players that they've got. Trey White's a good player. Dennis Evans is somebody that I've heard is a really solid player as well. Louisville's going to be improved. They're going to be improved. Absolutely. Absolutely they will. All right. On November 6th, New Mexico State. This is the 6th most important non-con game, according to Andy Patton. And this is what he says here. Part of the reason this game is ranked as high as it is, despite last year's challenges, this is one of the most overhauled rosters in the country. The Aggies had 11 players in the portal, and playing them so early in the season creates a unique wrinkle for Calipari, as they'll have a much harder time prepping a game plan against this squad. They brought in, let's see here, Sam Houston State, head coach Jason Hooten. They added a top 50 transfer portal class, headlined by Seton Hall guard Femi Odukale. Man, I'm so bad pronouncing names. UCF wing Brandon Suggs, Wake Forest center Davion Bradford. Femi, I'll just say Odukale because that makes them maybe I'm pacing it wrong. Maybe it's Odukale or Dukale. I don't know. I'm stupid. November 20th is St. Joseph's here. St. Joe's was barely a top 200 team on KenPom. We talked about them recently on the show. This shouldn't be a struggle for UK, but they do bring back Eric Reynolds II, who averaged almost 20 points per game, including almost everybody and their mother from this roster. So it's going to be a little bit of a test here for St. Joseph's. So that's the top 7. That's the top 7 in terms of the most important games on Kentucky's non-con slate. I'm going to continue along here in just a second and get to some teams that I still think are going to be legitimate tests, I think, for this young Wildcat squad. Before we dive into that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season has begun. You can get ready for the rest of it with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's a great, great deal. And now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. That is FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. So we've got a few more non-con games to get to here. And the 8th most important game, according to Andy Patton, is against a team that I still think is going to be pretty good against the Wildcats this season. Marshall is the number 8 team on this non-con slate ranking. They were a top 100 KenPom team last year. They went 24-8, and they had a lot of really good offensive players, and that's what Patton wants to note here. They are lower on this list because both Tavion Kinsey and Andrew Taylor are gone. Kinsey graduated after scoring over 2,600 points for the Thundering Herd, while Taylor hit the portal. He transferred to Mississippi State. I hinted at that recently on an episode about how I said I think Mississippi State's going to be a much improved offensive team with their shooting, and I think Tolu Smith's going to be a great big man for them, so they're going to have a nice complement, I think, on offense with Taylor and Tolu Smith. Taylor's a good basketball player. He's a great shooter. Kinsey was a great scorer, but those guys are both gone from Marshall. Also, Micah Logton is gone to Florida, depleting what was an already experienced and talented team last year. A few decent mid-major portal additions don't replicate what Coach D'Antoni lost, and Kentucky shouldn't struggle with this team unless they are still full from Thanksgiving dinner. That's what Patton has to say here. I think they're a decently coached team. I expect them to find guys that can score for them. I agree. I don't think that this is going to be as tough of a task as it would have been a season ago, but I still have a lot of faith in this Marshall squad. I don't think that there are a lot of numbers that really back that up. I've got a gut feeling about it. Penn is underneath Marshall on this ranking. Let's hear what Patton had to say about Penn. The Wildcats will play them in Philadelphia this season. A nice homecoming for many Kentucky stars. Obviously, 17-13. Penn was a season ago. They finished 3rd in the Ivy League thanks to one player, Jordan Dingle. He averaged 23.4 points per game. That was 2nd in the country behind Antoine Davis. Dingle is now with Coach Rick Pitino at St. John's. Gosh, I would love to see Kentucky play St. John's in the postseason. And while the Quakers kept many other key players, they will have a hard time replicating last year's success without their star scorer. Kentucky should feel right at home in Philly, and this game falls at a nice time in the schedule for a well-rested Wildcats team to take care of business. I could not agree more with Andy Patton about this game. Solid team, good coaching, lost their star player, probably not as big of a test as, again, it would have been a season ago. There are a lot of teams on this slate that would have been really tough, I think, for that Kentucky team. This Kentucky team, I think, is going to be okay against some of these guys. Another team that I have a lot of respect for, UNC Wilmington. They won 24 games last year, finished 3rd in the CAA. They returned their 3 leading scorers, who are all seniors, giving them plenty of experience and continuity. They also added a guy from New Mexico, KJ Jenkins, shot 43.6% from deep last year. This team does not have a lot of size, though. I don't really think that how do I say this? I think that it impacts the game, obviously. Kentucky's going to probably dominate this game athletically. But whenever it comes to matching up with some of these smaller schools, it doesn't necessarily matter how big they are. We got to see that with St. Peter's a couple of years ago. Don't get mad. But they were not big, and they also didn't shoot well. And UNC Wilmington, sure, they may have a couple players that can shoot really well, and that may be what gets them over the hump. It doesn't matter how tall they are, though. You can make tough shots, and if you can do that, you're going to have a tough time if you're an opponent. So UNC Wilmington, again, another team that I really do think that they're solid. I don't think they're a bad squad at all. I think they're solid. Illinois State, the Antonio Reeves Bowl. Not a whole lot else to say about what else this could be. Redbirds went 11-21 last year. Former Wisconsin guard Jordan Davis is here. Antonio Reeves is going to be the guy that we're all focusing on in this matchup, though. That is the 11th most important game. Texas A&M Commerce, sandwiched between the season opener against NMSU and the big matchup against Kansas, is a date with the Lions of Texas A&M Commerce, a squad that finished outside the KenPom top 300 last year. This was not a good team, point blank. This will probably not be a good team for Kentucky against Kentucky. That's just how it's going to be. It doesn't matter how young the Wildcats are. If Kentucky struggles in this one, Houston, we have a problem. This will be a huge issue if Kentucky has an issue in this one. And the final game, this is a program that writer at Wildcats Today, Andrew Stefaniak, told me that he had no idea existed. until we talked about them. Stonehill. Stonehill had their first season as a Division I program last year, and it went pretty okay. They finished 10-6 in conference play, and that was tied for second in the NEC. They went 14-7 overall, obviously struggled in their non-con slate. I mean, who wouldn't in their first year as a Division I team? They also posted the same conference record as FDU, who beat Purdue in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year. Kentucky fans won't likely have much to worry about against this Seahawks squad as they'll recover from their early test versus Kansas a few days prior. I agree. This makes sense considering where it falls on the schedule. Also, not a great team last year, or not a great team last year, and still transitioning. But impressive what Stonehill was able to do in their first year as a Division I program. Lots of respect for the Seahawks. All right. If you've got any thoughts on Kentucky basketball's non-con slate, there it is. It's ranked there from 1 to 13. You can go check that article out at wildcatstoday.com. Any opinions, thoughts, questions, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. And I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. Follow me on Twitter at LanceDahl_, and follow the show over on Instagram at Kentucky Podcast. Once more, questions, comments, concerns, leave them all below. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.